From WCI3 Plus, with your host, Kevin Lighty, this is Behind the Forecast.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome in once again. That's me. I am Chief Meteorologist Kevin Lighty here at WCIA, coming to you here from the lovely WCIA3 Plus podcast studio here, guys. Thanks for joining us. Pleasure to have you here with us, and excited to have another show. You can follow me. I've got all these different places you can follow me. You can see them up there. Give me a like, follow, all those good things to keep up to date when you're on the go and just kind of wondering what else is going on. Well, I'm going to tell you what's going to go on during this show. First, we're going to do the viral weather videos, and then later on in the show, we're going to talk a little bit more about what to expect for the upcoming winter season. So we've done a little bit, talking with Judy, and we touched a little bit on when we talked with the National Weather Service. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth here. Now, just as a little bit of an FYI, the WCIA3 Winter Weather Outlook officially is going to air on Wednesday, November 19th. Okay, so I just want you guys to make sure you tune in for that. But for those of you that have taken the time to come and join me right here on the show, Behind the Forecast, I'm going to give you a little bit of a sneak peek into some of the things that I'm monitoring, some of the things that I'm looking at. And so we're going to talk about El Nino and La Nina and some other, things as well, and look at some other forecasts that have already come out for the season. So that is going to come up a little bit later on in the show. But as you all know by now, hopefully you've watched, we are up to episode 19 of the show here. We always start out with the viral weather videos of the week. And we start out here with our number 5 video, the atmospheric river, as they like to call it. So I find it so interesting. Every year there's like a new term that becomes popular, and this year it's the atmospheric river. So basically the jet stream in a position that provides active storm systems. Well, Oregon's getting hit pretty hard. California, Northern California as well. They're getting a bunch of rain out that way. They call it the atmospheric river. So the waters are up over there, as you can see. That same system heading into our neck of the woods here in the coming days and whatnot. So thought we'd kind of share with you some of that beginning video of the atmospheric river coming at you, because it'll be here. Abrupt edge. Quite the graphic there, right? Abrupt edge. I've never seen that one before. All right. We're going to go to video number 4, and it's the supermoon in China. Take a look at it. Yes, we've had the big, bright supermoon that has been occurring here. So what is the supermoon? Basically, it's the point in the orbit of the moon around the Earth where it's a little bit larger in the sky, because again, the Earth does not, or inside the moon is not in the perfect circular orbit. It's elliptical. So there's points when it's further away, when it's closer. And so that's what we've got there with the full supermoon, known as the beaver moon, is what they call it. And so that came into play here. Boy, look at those shots. I think those shots are just fantastic. Okay, we're going to go over here to video number 3, and it is the cleanup from a typhoon in the Philippines. Look at this. I mean, you would think that this might be, Jamaica, which we have a video coming up of that here, but typhoons as well. Just devastating out there in the Philippines. Hurricanes, typhoons, same thing. Huge storms over the ocean that form there, and very powerful. We just had the one that hit Jamaica, and they're still in all of their cleanup mode, but the Philippines there often get hit hard by storms like this, and so they're getting it pretty good over there as well. So feel for those people there, and still feeling for those in Jamaica. These are images coming out after Melissa came through. Hurricane cleanup happening in Jamaica there. Crews all coming in to help out. And you can just see the devastation. Look at that. I mean, just seeing it from above always is jarring. But the mud, the cleanup, the water, homes underwater, the damage from the winds. Category 5 hurricane, one of the strongest hurricanes we have seen in recent times. Okay, before we get to our video number 1, so usually I just do, regular videos. We kind of talk over them, but we're going to do something a little bit different here. And I'm going to let you actually listen to the whole story. It's what we call in the news business, it's called a package. So a reporter filed this package here, and I'm just going to let you guys watch the whole thing. Pretty interesting video of a Texas tornado. It is our viral weather video number 1. Here we go.
You can almost feel the force of it. Winds whipping, trees twisting as a tornado glides through Ashley Turner's yard.
We've been on this property since 2019.
You can see a tree topple, leaves being sucked from the yard, and the winds so strong they even moved the camera itself. Ashley says she's never seen anything like this.
Definitely not this degree of wind, weather.
She and her coworker were inside a small office just behind her home when the storm rolled in Tuesday afternoon.
A little bit of wind quickly picked up, and we could definitely tell it wasn't just straight line winds or anything like that coming. We quickly figured out it was definitely a tornado that was coming through the backyard.
She says the tornado was in and out in about 45 seconds, but the cleanup will take far longer. Just down the road, another homeowner told us he barely had time to react. His barn was mangled, a trailer flipped, and trees splintered across his property. He didn't want to be on camera, but says the tornado came out of nowhere and lasted just moments. He took cover inside this shed while family members huddled inside their truck until it passed.
Super grateful that everyone here was fine.
The storm may be gone, but the cleanup across this area is just now beginning. But neighbors say they're just thankful to be alive to do it. In Smith County, I'm Jesus Martinez.
Well, there you go. Down in Texas tornado, Lindale, Texas there. Just kind of wild, the whipping of the trees there and twisting. And the cameras that can capture this now, I think, are just so interesting. Everybody's got, these cameras you can buy for your home. They're so cheap nowadays. A lot of things are getting captured a lot more. So we're seeing more, of these things on camera. So pretty wild stuff. The power of Mother Nature down there, just wicked, even this time of the year. Okay, we've got more weather coming up. We're going to talk winter weather. I know some of you may go, I want to talk winter. I don't want winter. It's too early for winter. Well, it's starting to feel like it here. Snow is in the forecast. But the big question is, again, what about the upcoming winter? What are we looking at? As I mentioned earlier, our official forecast isn't until November 19th. But I'm going to give you guys a sneak peek into kind of some of the things that I'm looking at here. We're going to show you some other things. Farmer's Almanac. Have you heard of that? How about the old Farmer's Almanac? Did you know that there are 2 different ones there? That's right. I named off 2 different ones. There are 2 different ones that put out forecasts. And it's interesting because they're never the same usually. I'll show you those. Persimmon seeds, woolly worms. We'll dive into that as well. And a little bit of science too. It's coming up after the break right here on Behind the Forecast. All right, everybody, welcome back into Behind the Forecast. That's me right there, Chief Meteorologist Kevin Lighty. Thanks for joining us again as we are going to be into the second half of the show here, where we're going to talk a little bit more about the winter, the upcoming winter. The number one question I always get, especially this time of the year, well, what's the winter going to be like? What kind of winter are we going to have? It's a tough thing to try and forecast, to come up with. You're looking at long-term models. You're looking at long-term kind of patterns and trying to decipher what's going to happen 3 months down the road, oftentimes in the month of November, as your forecast for December, January, and February. It's not the easiest thing to do. And I've been doing a winter forecast for, I'm going to say, because I've been a chief meteorologist for 18 years now, which is wild. 18 years. I've been in the business for 23, but I've been a chief tasked with coming up with a winter forecast to put out for now 18 years. So a lot of things that we look at here. Have I gotten them all right? No. Have I gotten a lot of them right? Yeah. We can see those kind of things. Now, I can't tell you the exact day it's going to snow 3 months out or even a month out, but we can kind of give you a general idea of what is going to be happening in the atmosphere. Now, if you watched an earlier episode, we talked to the National Weather Service in Lincoln. We talked a little bit about the NOAA forecast, and I just kind of want to give you a little bit of a refresher on what they're showing because I'm going to show you some other forecasts from some other entities as well. So here we go. This is your forecast from NOAA, the seasonal temperature outlook. Basically, they're saying it could go either way. Okay, it could be colder than normal. It could be warmer than normal. Or we might have a little bit of both. And so that's basically what that graphic there is pretty much telling us is, we may have a little bit of everything kind of coming at us. Now, I think this one is more interesting. It's the precipitation. Boom. How about that? Look at that, where we are, of course, over Illinois, Indiana, Great Lakes region, above average. So they're actually seeing a signal that points more towards an above average precipitation winter. But what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean we're going to have more snow? Well, it could very well mean that we're just going to have more rain, right? Because all it's talking about is precipitation. So above average precipitation is what's expected here. So we'll have to kind of put a pin in that. But I do find it interesting. And this lines up with a forecast for what is known as La Nina or El Nino, the cooling and warming of the ocean waters, okay? And we're going to get into that here more in just a second. But I'm going to show you some other forecasts that come into play. And yes, have you heard of the Farmer's Almanac? I always get them confused here. There's the Farmer's Almanac, and then there's the Old Farmer's Almanac. Both have been around a long time. Both write, some really interesting things when it comes to, forecasting and gardening, and there's all kinds of things in here. So I'm going to go back to the graphic here because it is interesting. Pull it up. There you go. That is their forecast, okay? You can see that over where we live, Illinois, Indiana, very cold and snowy. Notice that kind of lined up a little bit with that NOAA forecast, right? So this is the Farmer's Almanac version of what they think the winter's going to be like. And you can peek at some of the other parts of the country if maybe you're watching from somewhere else. And there you go. How about it? Okay, now we're going to switch over to the Old Farmer's Almanac. They're both been around a long time. They're both old, if you ask me. But the Old Farmer's Almanac. You can pick either of these up at your local, usually, your local, I think like Ace Hardware or your local store like that, or some grocery stores have them there. So this one, maybe not as ominous for our area. Mild and dry, cold and dry. So definitely not taking into account, having that high precipitation. So how interesting is it, though, that a lot of the country on this map is mild and dry? I've never actually seen, look at Alaska, California, Maine, Louisiana, Texas, mild and dry. So it's always interesting to kind of look at these things, take them with a grain of salt, right? They're for fun. Now, some people swear by them, and there's some great information in some of these books too that can help you out with things. So you can check it out. But let's talk a little bit more science on some of this stuff here. And I mentioned it just a little bit earlier, and bear with me here because I might pull up the wrong graphic. So there is the Farmer's Almanac, but we're going to go to this one here and talk a little bit more about El Nino and La Nina. Now, you've probably heard the terms a lot, but what do they really mean? Basically, as I mentioned before, it is the warming and the cooling of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. So the Pacific right there at the equator, and the warming and cooling of those ocean waters can drive what the weather is going to be like here in the United States, or at least it kind of drives the pattern because it shifts jet streams, it shifts storm patterns, okay? And thus can shift, how temperature profiles will be set up for the season. So an El Nino, okay, is when you have the warming of the ocean waters there on your left side of that graphic there. Then you get the cooling of the ocean waters, which is a La Nina. Now, sometimes there's something called a neutral, and that's when they're right in the middle. When they're not doing anything, when they're not warmer or cooler, they're right normal. And we call that a neutral pattern, which can come into play in forecasting as well. So, what are we looking at here for this year? Well, if we look at some of the model-based probabilistic forecasts, the blue color is a La Nina. Notice the percentage chances there. Gray is neutral, as we mentioned, and red would be El Nino. Well, this year, we've got those cooler ocean waters, okay? So there's a high probability. And you can see the bottom are going to be your months. They're kind of in 3-month intervals there. October, November, December, December, January, so on and so forth. So if you look at just those winter months, we are either, kind of at the La Nina or transitioning as we head into springtime into a neutral pattern. So we're kind of teetering on the edge of what would be considered maybe a weak La Nina pattern, okay? And now you're saying, okay, great. Well, what does that mean as well? Well, we also, look at these El Ninos and La Ninas and try to figure out how strong they are, how weak they are. But in general, if you just look at this graphic here, an El Nino winter typically actually brings drier conditions to our neck of the woods. The jet stream, Pacific jet stream, has that amplified storm track more to the south, the southern part of the United States, okay? And so you get low pressure that develops, out in the Pacific there, and then you kind of get these troughs, and essentially for our neck of the woods, we don't have as snowier of winters. Now, we've had snow during a new winter, so don't get me wrong. But the La Nina patterns are way more conducive for that. And you can see that here on this graphic. And I know it'll be kind of tough to kind of see where we are there on that, but you got to look close. But we are in the wetter pattern, and that lines up with that NOAA forecast. You get high blocking pressure. So the high, kind of develops up there, towards Alaska, and it develops up there, creates that ridge, and then trough. You got a ridge and then a trough. And that trough comes down, bringing in system after system, barreling across the plains and tracking sometimes favorably for more snow. Okay. So that's kind of a basic El Nino, La Nina explainer. I know there's a lot more that, that goes into it, but that's kind of the foundation for where forecasters and meteorologists look at things, just to begin. There are lots of other factors and things that we have to look at sometimes, but that's just kind of a basic one. So, and let me get back to the correct picture here. So that was that one showing you that. There's your La Nina. But how strong is it going to be? Well, here we go. We look at this. Okay. As I mentioned before, a weak La Nina. So basically that's telling us that the ocean waters are only about a degree, half degree to a degree cooler than normal. And you can see so on and so forth. So it's only about a 2-degree difference. Or maybe I guess you technically say about 4 because 2 on either side of that. But a 2 to 4 degree difference in the ocean waters there. And so it tells us a lot if it's a strong one versus a moderate versus a weak. And then we can go back and look. So this is what I actually do. And this is what I don't want to totally give away within the show here because we're going to do more about it in the winter weather outlook special coming up again November 19th. But we look at some of those, then go back and look at what are called analog years. Years that have a similar setup with a La Nina or an El Nino, that have a similar setup with something called the North Atlantic Oscillation and Pacific, we call the P&O. And there's all of these things that we look at here. But we want to go back and look at years that, okay, it was pretty similar. What happened that year? And then look at the numbers and try to compare and contrast that. So I do that in the winter special. So I'll show you some analog years. I'll be like, this is a year that looks similar from the past, and here's what happened that year. And sometimes I model my forecast off of whichever one of those that I choose. So all of that being said, I don't want to give away a ton with the forecast just yet. But the only thing that I will say is we are leaning maybe towards a more winter-like pattern than we've had in the previous years recently. So for snow lovers, is that good for you? We'll see. Now, there's a lot more to get into with that, and we'll be doing that in the forecast special, so tune in. But I want to talk about a couple other things that people like to look at to come up with it. And it's less sciencey, more fun, as they call weather lore. And I know that you know this one. The woolly worm. Our own Judy Fraser, of course, does a lot of this every year for us. And you've seen these, I'm sure. So what do they mean? Well, you got lots of brown. Sometimes it's a milder winter. If there's lots of black, it can be a cold, harsh winter. If you got white, it can mean snowy winter. And go back and watch some of the previous episodes here on Behind the Forecast when I talked to Judy Fraser. If you are totally into this kind of thing, great episode with her where she talks to us about all that she thinks is going to happen with the winter. And it's an interesting one. So it's been around for so many years. Do you believe it? Do you not believe it? Always an interesting question there. But there's another one that we like to look at as well, and I'm going to pull it up here for you. And that is going to be persimmon seeds. Boom. If you cut open a persimmon seed, and let me just tell you, it's not easy to do because these things are small. You got to have a sharp knife to do so. You got to be careful not to, cut your hand. But if you open them up, they will have one of these three shapes: a fork, a knife, or a spoon. Fork, meaning there's going to be a mild winter. The knife, cutting cold, as they like to say, and a cold winter. And a spoon, shoveling snow with that spoon with lots of snow. So persimmon seeds are something that people look at. There are many other kind of folklore things that a lot of people, kind of keep up with and like to use as their gauge for what the winter is going to be like. And, here's the thing. There's no right or wrong to it. I think it's fun. I think that everybody, give it a shot. What we try to do is very difficult. So some people maybe don't have as much experience doing it, but you can look at some of these old folklore things. See if they come true. There are other ones that talk about, what's the one about the rabbit? There's one about a rabbit, and there's one about, how many fogs that we have in a certain month. And so there's just so many things. If you Google weather lore or winter weather lore or ways to forecast the winter with weather lore, you'll go down a rabbit hole. There you go. See a rabbit? See what it did there? Of ways that people come up with things. And it's been around for a long time, and it gets passed down from generation to generation. So we like to keep some of that alive. But again, there's still the science part of it. If you want to know more about this, I definitely encourage you guys to tune into the winter weather outlook forecast. And then we post like a whole blog, a whole story on our website. You can even go back and look at our previous. If you just Google WCIA, like former or WCIA, winter forecast from years past, you can find some of those and kind of compare them to maybe what happened in the previous years if you want to, or kind of see some of the other things. I look at solar. Okay, where are we at in the solar cycle? I look at things that are like snow cover up in Canada that we look at, and up in Russia, and how that kind of depicts on what happens here. I know it sounds kind of crazy what's happening so far away, but that's kind of the nature of things. Everything is kind of connected. Telekinesis, and it is an interesting but tough thing to try and forecast and do, but I definitely enjoy it. So November 19th is the winter weather outlook that you can see. It'll be at 6:30 p.m. on WCIA. And then, of course, it'll be on the website and several other things. So I encourage you guys to tune into that to find out much more. But that's actually going to wrap things up here. I've had a great time joining you guys once again. Thanks for being here with us on another episode of Behind the Forecast. We'll see you again next time.